Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're talking about how to find way more mule deer bucks by using tactics that change the way you read country, glass terrain, and make decisions during the hunt. And I want to be clear right up front, this is not about telling you to try harder. Most serious mule deer hunters are already trying hard. They're hiking, they're glassing, they're getting up early, they're staying late, they're studying maps. They're burning boot leather. They're putting in the kind of effort that most people will never understand. But effort by itself doesn't always equal results. You can work hard in the wrong basin. You can glass for hours from the wrong angle. You can sit behind great optics and still miss deer because the sun, shade, terrain, and bedding cover are working against you. You can be in mule deer country and still not be looking at the exact places bucks are most likely to show themselves. That is what this episode is about. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent mule deer hunter. Not shortcuts, not gimmicks here, not some magic tactic that suddenly makes mule deer easy to find. This is about upgrading the system, your system, because if you want to find more mule deer bucks, especially mature bucks, you have to stop just looking at country and stop reading how deer actually use it. You have to understand visibility windows, shade, pressure, feed quality, elevation bands, micro bedding pockets, and the small details that a lot of deer hunters just scan past. The goal is not to hunt harder in random country. The goal is to make better decisions all day long out there so your effort keeps getting pointed at higher probability mule deer places. And when you stack enough good decisions together, you don't just find a few more deer. You can completely change what you see on the mountain. So tactic number one, stop hunting deer country and start hunting visibility windows. One of the biggest shifts you can make as a mule deer hunter is to stop thinking only in terms of good deer country and start thinking in terms of visibility windows, because there is a difference. A basin can have deer in it. A ridge system can have mature bucks using it. A burn, avalanche chute, sage pocket, or high country bowl can look perfect on a map and still produce nothing for you if you're not watching it when deer are actually available to be seen. That's where a lot of good hunters lose time. They're in the right general area, but they're glassing it during the wrong window, from the wrong angle, or with the wrong expectations. Mule deer don't usually stand out in the open all day waiting to be found unless they're in the middle of heavy rut, right? Mature bucks, especially, are masters at shrinking their exposure. They feed when they feel safe. They transition when they have to. Then they disappear into shade, brush, broken terrain, or small bedding pockets where they can see danger coming and escape without wasting too much energy. So the question is not just, does this country hold deer? The better question is, when are deer most likely to show themselves right here? In the morning, I want to know where deer are finishing their feed to bed movement. I'm looking for the last open pockets, the transition edges, the cuts, the small shelves, and the brushy folds where a buck might pause before tucking into security for the day. In the evening, I'm thinking differently. I'm looking for staging areas. I want the edges above feed, the shaded openings, places deer might stand before fully committing to the open. That's the first new tactic. Don't just hunt deer country. Hunt the windows when that country gives deer away. Tactic number two, use the three-angle glassing system. The next mistake I see a lot of mule deer hunters make is assuming they've glassed a basin just because they looked at it from one good vantage point. And that's not always true. You may have glassed the visible parts of that basin. You may have glassed the obvious openings. You might have picked apart the feed, the main slides, the clean hillsides, and the terrain that looks good from your position. But that doesn't mean you saw the whole story. Mule deer country is full of dead ground, right? Little rollovers, brush lines, shadow pockets, cliff bands, finger ridges, folds in the hill, and small benches that can all hide deer from just one angle completely. A buck can be bedded in the open by his standards and still be invisible from where you're sitting. And that's why I like to think in terms of three-angle glassing system, right? Before I give up, on good country, I want to look at it from more than one direction if the terrain allows it, and if possible, three. So a high angle might help you see into pockets below brush and timber. A side angle might expose bedding shelves and cuts that were hidden from the first knob. A lower or reverse angle might show you deer tucked under terrain that looks flat or empty from above. This doesn't mean you bounce around all day and never settle in, but it does mean you don't judge a basin too fast from just one convenient spot. A lot of mule deer hunters change basins when they should have changed angles, and that's a big difference. If the country has feed, bedding, cover, shade, escape terrain, and low enough pressure to make sense, don't move too quick or write it off. Move enough to see it differently. Let the sun change. Let the shadow shift. Look back into that country from a new position. Sometimes finding more mule deer isn't just about covering more country. Sometimes it's about finally seeing the country you're actually already hunting.
Hey, if you're serious about becoming a more consistent mule deer hunter, I built a mule deer hunting series of ebooks to walk you through my entire process step by step. This is a 7-volume system designed specifically for Western hunters pursuing mule deer in real mountain and public land environments. In Volume 1, Foundations and Reality, you're going to learn how to understand how mule deer actually live, the myths that mislead most hunters, and the mindset required for consistent success. In Volume 2, Finding Mule Deer and Understanding Pressure, you're going to learn how mule deer move across the landscape and how hunting pressure changes their behavior. In Volume 3, Terrain, Aspect, and Positioning, you're going to learn how to read mule deer country and position yourself correctly using terrain and wind. In Volume 4, Glassing, Visual Discipline, and Buck Identification, you're going to learn how to find mule deer, glass efficiently, and identify mature bucks. In Volume 5, Early Season and High Country Strategy, you're going to learn how to hunt velvet and early season bucks in alpine terrain. In Volume 6, Rut, Transition, and Late Season Movement, we're going to talk about understanding migration, cold weather movement, and how bucks shift through the season. And in Volume 7, Execution and Decision Stacking, we're going to talk about how to close the distance, execute under pressure, and make disciplined decisions during the stalk. If you want to hunt mule deer with structure instead of guesswork, you can buy them individually, or you can bundle all the volumes together and save 50% off the entire mule deer hunting series of ebooks at backboneunlimited.com.
Tactic number 3, hunt shade like it's cover. If you want to find more mule deer, especially mature bucks, you have to start treating shade like cover. A lot of hunters understand brush. They understand timber. They understand cliff, rock piles, and broken terrain. But shade gets overlooked because it doesn't look like physical cover on a map. You can't just mark it the same way, right? You can't see that shade on your map. You have to read it in real time. And mule deer use it extremely well. A buck doesn't need to be buried in a dark timber patch to disappear. Sometimes all he needs is a strip of shadow below a cliff, or the shaded side of a brush pocket, or a dark fold under a rim, or the north side of a small cut where his body just blends into the background. From a distance, that deer might be almost completely visible, but because of contrast and shadow, your eyes slide right over him. That's why midday glassing should not be random. Once that sun gets higher and deer start locking into beds, I want my eyes going straight to the places where shade overlaps with security. I'm looking at brushy shade, rocky shade, cliffy shade, timber edge shade, and small shadow pockets on side hills that all give a buck a view and a way out, right? From his perspective. Most deer hunters naturally glass the open, right? The sunlit face, because it's easier. That's where your eyes want to go. But mature bucks are not trying to make things easy for you. They're trying to bed where the mountain protects them. The other piece is that shade changes all day. A pocket that looked useless at 8 o'clock in the morning might become a perfect bedding pocket at noon. A buck might not move far, but the mountain around him changes enough that he becomes easier or harder to see. So don't just glass terrain, glass the light, glass the shadow, glass that contrast. A lot of hidden mule deer bucks are not buried all that deep. They're just bedded where your eyes weren't trained to look. Tactic number 4, Find the micro beds, not just the big basins. One of the biggest upgrades you can make in mule deer hunting is learning to look smaller. A lot of mule deer hunters look at big country in big pieces. They see the main basin, the big ridge, the obvious avalanche chute, the open feeding face, the timber patch, or even just major benches. And those features do matter. I'm not saying they don't, but mature bucks often live in the small details inside that bigger country. They might bed on a little shelf that barely shows up on a topo map. They might tuck into a brushy knob halfway down a ridge. They might use a tiny cut below a skyline or a rock outcrop with shade underneath it, or a side hill pocket that catches wind just right, or even a small finger ridge that gives them visibility, escape, and cover all in one place. That's what I mean by micro beds. Those aren't always big, obvious bedding areas. Sometimes they're just small little pieces of terrain that solve several problems for a buck all at once. Can he see danger coming? Can he smell what he can't see? Can he get shade? Can he slip out without exposing himself? Can he stay close enough to feed without wasting energy? When a spot checks enough of those boxes, it can absolutely hold a buck, even if it doesn't look impressive from a distance or on the map. This is where a lot of hunters miss deer. They glass the obvious openings, then they move on, but the buck might be bedded 30 yards into the edge, under one shadow, or behind one brush, or just below one rock, or even just tucked into one fold that looked too small to matter from a distance. So when you find country with the right ingredients, slow down and pick it apart. Don't just look for deer standing in the open. That's not what this is about. Look for the bed that a smart buck would choose if he was trying to stay alive. Tactic number 5, track the feed quality, not just the color, right? Not just the green stuff. Another way to find more mule deer is to get very specific about feed. A lot of deer hunters look at a hillside, they see green and assume it should have deer, but mule deer are not just looking for something green. They're looking for the best available nutrition they can get while still staying close enough to security. That part matters a lot. A buck doesn't want to expose himself longer than he has to. So if he can feed near bedding cover, shade, escape terrain, and a wind advantage, that setup becomes a lot more valuable than just a big open feed face that forces him to be visible too long, even if that food looks good. So when I'm looking at feed, I'm not just asking, is there food here? I'm asking, is this the best available feed for this time of year, this elevation, this moisture pattern, and this pressure level that all meet the deer's needs at the same time? So early in the season, that might mean high elevation basins and burns, avalanche chutes, willow pockets, lush edges, or small pockets of green growth that all hold quality longer than the surrounding country that dries out. Later, it might shift with weather or frost or drought or hunting pressure or migration movement, so that can all change. A slope can look really good from a mile away and still be past its prime, too. Another pocket might not look impressive at first glance, but if it has better moisture, better plant quality, and better security nearby, that might be where the deer are actually spending their time. So this is why you have to read the mountain like a living system. Where is the freshest feed? Where is the best browse? Where is the feed close to bedding and security? Where can a mature buck eat without giving up every advantage he has? If you want to find more mule deer, stop treating all green country the same. The best feed is not always the biggest patch. It's the feed a buck can use and survive. Tactic number 6, hunt pressure by predicting where deer feel unseen. One of the best ways to find more mule deer bucks is to stop looking at pressure only as something that ruins a hunt. Pressure absolutely changes the hunt, but it also gives you information. Every road, trailhead, camp, glassing knot, ATV route, hiking path, ridge walk, and obvious basin entrance tells you something about how people are using that country. And once you understand how people are using it, you can start predicting where deer are going to feel safer during daylight. Mature bucks don't always leave the entire area when pressure shows up. Sometimes they just shift into terrain that makes them harder to find or harder to approach or harder to glass. And that might be a brushy pocket below a popular ridge. It might be a steep side hill that nobody wants to side hill across. It might be a small cut hidden from the main glassing knob. It could be private land edges. It could be a nasty timber finger or a a cliffy pocket or a piece of broken country between two obvious basins. The mistake is assuming the best looking country is always the best hunting country. Sometimes the prettiest basin gets hunted the hardest. Sometimes the biggest glassing knob shows you exactly where every other hunter is going to sit. Sometimes deer survive not because they found perfect habitat, but because they found a place where people don't want to bother them. So before I decide where to glass, I want to ask a different question. Where can a buck live here and still feel unseen? Where is the terrain hidden from the road? Where does the normal hunter route miss a pocket? Where would pressure push deer without forcing them completely out of their home range? If you can learn to read hunter behavior the same way you read deer behavior, you can start finding pockets that a lot of other people walk past. Pressure does not just move deer, it reveals where smart deer can survive. Tactic number 7, use elevation bands as a filter, not as a rule. Elevation absolutely matters in mule deer hunting a lot of times, especially in big country, but it gets hunters into trouble when they turn it into a hard rule. You'll hear it all the time. Early season bucks are high. Late season bucks are low. Rut bucks are with does. Pressure pushes deer into rough country. Weather moves them down. So there could be truth in all of those ideas depending on where you're at, what time of year it is, what the deer are actually doing at that time, but they are not complete answers. They're just starting points. If you treat every elevation band like a rule, you can waste a lot of time hunting country that technically fits the season but doesn't actually have the right ingredients. A high basin, for instance, is not automatically good just because it's high. A low winter range pocket is not automatically good just because deer eventually end up lower. Elevation narrows the search, but it doesn't finish the job. What matters is what that elevation band provides right now for the deer. Is the feed still good? Is there water or moisture holding forage there? Is there bedding cover close enough to feed? Is there shade for the daytime? Is there escape terrain? Is hunting pressure changing how deer use that country? Are deer still living there, or are you hunting where they were 2, 3 weeks ago? That last question is huge because mule deer hunting can change fast when feed dries out, or snow hits, or pressure stacks up, or deer just start transitioning. If you're locked into one elevation idea just because that's the rumor or that's what you've heard, you might keep hunting yesterday's pattern while the deer have already adjusted. So use elevation as a filter. Let it help you eliminate dead country. Let it point you towards the most likely zone for the season you're in, the weather that's happening, and the behavior you're actually dealing with. But once you get there, make the final decision based on terrain, feed, shade, security for the deer, pressure, and fresh sign. The goal is not to say the deer should be at this elevation. The goal is to ask, what does this elevation give them right now? And that question is going to keep you from hunting an idea instead of hunting the deer. Tactic number 8, stop leaving too soon when the country has the right ingredients. One of the hardest parts of mule deer hunting is knowing when to stay and when to move. And that sounds really simple and generic, but don't skip this because it's not. Because you can waste a lot of time being stubborn in country that doesn't have what deer need. But you can also ruin a good hunt by leaving an area too fast just because you didn't see deer right away. And that's where a lot of good deer hunters get caught in the middle. They know they need patience, but they also know they can't just sit on dead country forever. So the real skill is not simply being patient. The real skill is knowing what kind of country deserves your patience. Before I leave an area, for instance, I want to look at the ingredients. Does it have quality feed for this time of year? Does it have bedding cover close enough to that feed? Does it have shade? Does it have escape terrain? Does it have places a buck can see, smell, or avoid danger? Does it have a lower pressure rate than the obvious country around it? Does it have fresh sign, tracks, bedding, droppings, trails, rubs, or repeated deer movement? If the answer is no, then moving is not quitting, it's making a better decision. But if the answer is yes, don't be too quick to give up on it. Sometimes the buck is there, but he just hasn't stood up yet. Sometimes you have only glassed the obvious openings. Sometimes the deer are tucked into shade. Sometimes you need a different angle. Sometimes the movement window hasn't opened. Mule deer don't always reward the hunter who covers the most miles, right? They reward the hunter who knows when a piece of country is worth slowing down for. So don't stay everywhere, but when the ingredients are right, give that country a real chance to show you what is actually living there. Tactic number 9, build a daily mule deer decision loop. If you want to find more mule deer bucks, your day can't just be a series of random glassing sessions. You need a decision loop. And that means every part of the day should teach you something that helps shape the next one. You're not just sitting behind glass hoping something steps out. You're gathering information, you're testing a pattern, you're learning, you're adjusting your position and narrowing down the country. In the morning, the question is simple: where are deer finishing their night and early morning movement? That doesn't mean you only glass wide open feed. It means you watch the routes between the feed and the security. You look at the last open pockets, the brush edges, the small cuts, the shaded folds, and the bedding approaches where deer might show themselves before they lock down for the day. After that, you adjust. If deer disappear into a pocket, don't just mark the sighting and forget it. Ask why they went there. Was it shade, wind, bedding cover, escape terrain, pressure? Was there better feed closer than you realized? Midday is not dead time if you use it right. That's when you tighten your glassing into shade, those micro pockets we talked about, the timber edges, rocky pockets, and the broken terrain. You might not see as much movement, but you can absolutely learn where deer feel secure right there. Then the evening becomes a second test. You reposition based on what the morning and midday told you. You're not just returning to the same knob because it was comfortable. You're trying to catch deer as they stage, stand, stretch, and start feeding again. At the end of the day, you should have more than just memories of what you saw. You should have a better plan for tomorrow. Where did deer enter cover? What angles showed the most country? What feed looked current? Where was pressure the highest? Where would a mature buck feel unseen? That's the loop. You want to observe, question, adjust, and then repeat based on what you learn. That's how you stop guessing and you start hunting with a system. Tactic number 10, adopt the 10x mindset. Multiply your deer sightings by multiplying your good decisions. Finding 10 times more mule deer doesn't usually come from just one huge breakthrough. It comes from stacking a lot of better decisions. And that's the part a lot of mule deer hunters overlook. They want the one tactic, the one spot, the one terrain feature that changes everything. But mule deer buck hunting rarely works that way. Mature bucks survive because they use a lot of small advantages together in their favor. So if you want to find them more consistently, you have to do the same thing. You need better country selection. You need better timing. You need better glassing angles. You need better patience in the right places. You need better discipline to leave the wrong places. And you need to understand feed, shade, pressure, elevation, bedding cover, escape routes, and how all those things connect. None of those decisions might feel dramatic by themselves, but when you start stacking them together, they start multiplying your odds. Instead of just hiking into a basin and hoping deer are there, you're going to start asking whether that basin gives deer what they need right now. Instead of glassing from the most obvious knob, you're thinking about blind spots, dead ground, and second angles. Instead of staring at the sunny open face because it's easier on your eyes, you're going to be picking apart the shade where a buck is more likely to feel secure. Instead of leaving after just one slow morning, you're deciding whether the country actually has the ingredients to deserve more of your time. That's the difference. The goal is not to become a harder hunter for the sake of being harder. Most serious hunters are already tough enough to suffer. The goal is to become a sharper hunter, a more disciplined hunter, a hunter who understands what mule deer are trying to accomplish before he ever puts his glass on the mountain. That's how you find more mule deer. You stop hunting random country and you start stacking decisions that put your eyes where deer are most likely to be. Now, at the end of the day, finding more mule deer bucks is not about chasing some magical tactic or pretending one trick is going to change everything, right? It's about building a better system. You start looking at visibility windows instead of just deer country. You start glassing from better angles. You treat shade like cover. You slow down on the micro beds. You judge feed by quality, not just color or existence. You read pressure. You use elevation as a filter, and you give the right country enough time to prove itself. That's how you start seeing what other hunters miss, because mature mule deer bucks are not random. They're using terrain, feed, shade, wind, pressure, and security all together to stay alive. And the more you understand that, the more consistent you're going to become. Hunt harder when it matters, hunt smarter all the time, and absolutely never settle. Now, if you want to go deeper into mule deer movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the Mule Deer Hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how mule deer actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of mule deer resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. I appreciate all of you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the comments. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.